What's up, everyone? Today I'm going to be talking about uneven lifting. And if you've ever hit the switch and it seems like, oh, the front is lifting just a little bit this way or a little bit that way and it just doesn't lift evenly, I'm going to go over several different options as to how to narrow down what's actually going on. So the first thing that you need to do is grab you a tape measure. You're going to want to take your tape measure and you are going to want to measure to ensure that your car is actually sitting level. So you want to make sure that the car is all the way down and sitting level, and then you're going to start to measure. So you're going to want to start by picking a place that is a center point on each side. I like to use the center point of my knockoff. So I'll use the edge and run it all the way down to the floor, and then I measure up to the fender. Okay, you're going to want to do that on both sides to ensure that the car does in fact sit at rest level. So once you've done that all the way around, then you can start to narrow down where the problem is coming from. Now that we've got all of our measurements all the way around, if you notice that there is a difference between, let's just say, 1/8 of an inch or higher on each side, 1/8 of an inch is not enough to really cause any unlevel lifting. It's not quite enough. But something over that 1/4 of an inch, that's enough to cause a little bit of an uneven lift. So the first thing you're going to want to do is check and see if your springs are turned in a different direction than the other side. So whichever side is off, whichever side is higher than the other is the side that you're going to mess with. So one side, the side that's lower is the side you're going to leave alone. So you're going to jump on the spring and turn it just a little bit. Try turning it just a little bit and make sure that it, does match the other side, and then lower it again and find out if the measurements match up. If they do, great. You move on to the next thing. If they don't, you're going to start to measure your trailing arms, and you're going to measure trailing arms from bolt to bolt on each one. You don't really want to measure the gap that's in between your adjustables. So for example, the gap may be the same on both sides, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the distance from one end of the trailing arm to the other end of the trailing arm is the same distance. Unfortunately, sometimes they are made even slightly off. So you need to measure from center of the bolt to center of the bolt. So you'll want to lift up the car. You're going to want to get up underneath there and measure bolt to bolt. And I'll show you here in just a second. All right, so hopefully you can see what I mean. I have already marked the center of the bolts, and you can measure from the center to center and get your measurement on both sides to ensure that those are the exact same on both sides, and just make your adjustment on your bolt there to ensure that they are the same. Now that we've adjusted and ensured that both of those trailing arms, the uppers and lowers, are the exact same length between the two of them, we're going to move on to the front. We're going to make sure that the front is level. If you have already made sure that the front is level at this point, you're just going to skip past and go to the next step. All right, before you start on the front, you want to ensure that everything again is all the way down. Okay, so we're going to drop the back and make sure that it's all laid out. Then the next thing, if we've confirmed that there is a problem up front as far as whether or not it's even or not, the first thing that I normally check is, and the most common thing, is that your spring will be turned. It'll be just turned, and it happens. You're riding down the street, the car's moving, the spring turns from time to time. Just go ahead and jack it up right from the center of the car, or right from the center of the frame, and let the two just hang. And you want to check and make sure that the spring on both sides is sitting at the same angle. And most of the time, how you want the springs to be sitting, if these are not pre-cuts in the front, pre-cuts are supposed to be the same size. So what I'm referring to is ones that have been cut. So if you've got cut springs in the front, like 3 or 4 tons, something like that, and it's not sitting level, this is normally the problem. So when the springs go in, the cut side, the part that looks like this, it will be facing the rim, okay? On both sides, it'll be facing the rim. That's how you normally can level them out to where it sits correctly, because the lowers, as they're going up and down, they're going like this. Well, you want that slanted edge going like that as well. So if it's turned even a little bit, it can throw it off. So I'll show you what I mean under here. So hopefully you can see what's going on in here. You're going to want to make sure that this spring is turned, this turn down here, the cut side, you're going to want to make sure that it is straight out, basically like that. Something like that. But make sure that they're just the same on both sides, and that's kind of where they like to rest at, and that's how they're going to be even. So now that we've measured all the way around and confirmed that everything is level, let's just assume that everything is level at this point. And you're probably going to say, well, what do I do if it's not level? Well, here's what you do. If it is not level and you've made adjustments to the front and rear, which obviously, like I said, start in the rear because there's a lot more adjustment in the rear to level it out. And if the rear is messed up, it can throw off the front and vice versa. So make sure that everything is, as together as possible. So let's just say that you've done that and you've adjusted the rear and you've adjusted the springs in the front and it's still uneven. Well, then that means you possibly have a different thing going on. So for example, let's just say your spring pocket has bent up, or a second thing, let's say that you're using springs that are even stock springs or whatever, and those springs have unevenly broke in. For example, you heated the springs in order to compress those springs. Well, if anyone's ever heated springs before, you know that they don't just stop there. They continue compressing over time. So that's why it's better to cut the springs than it is to heat the springs. But anyway, moving on. So if you have a problem like that, then you need to figure out where that problem is before you can move any further. All right, so jumping into your lifting problems after that. Let's just say, for example, you have already leveled everything out, everything's even, and when you hit the switch, it is still lifting uneven. Well, here's your potential other problems. You could have different size hoses, you could have different manufacturers of hoses. So what I mean by that is you've got one over here that looks like this and one over here that looks like this. Even though they technically are the same size, same length, same everything, each company that comes out with them has a different inside or outside, or excuse me, an inside diameter, which can allow for either more or less fluid. So realistically, you want to have both hoses made from the same place at the same time, and that way you can ensure that they're the same length, the same inside diameter, and that way it will lift correctly. Next thing comes into play, your plumbing. On your plumbing that goes from the pump to the front. So for example, if you have 90-degree fittings on both of your front and on the back, you've got a straight and a 90 on one side, or excuse me, a straight on one side and a 90-degree on the other side, just because that's how it needed to be in order to make everything work. That can technically throw it off just a little bit, technically. Doesn't normally throw it off much, but it can. A few more things that can throw this off. If you're running a 4-pump, for example, and you've got your rear is lifting at different times, you could have so many different possibilities on something like that. So let's just say you got 2 pumps going to the rear, right? This pump is stronger than this pump, or this one's older than this pump, or the motor spins more freely on this side than it does on this side, or you've got battery power. If you've got 2 banks and you're running 4 batteries over here, 4 batteries over here, and these batteries are not as charged as these batteries, obviously everything plays into all of this. So if it's not completely balanced out on everything, you can have problems. That's just the way that it goes. Much as I hate to say it, for you big guys out there, weight distribution does matter. So if you're in the car and you notice that it's lifting and the passenger side is lifting faster than the driver's side, well, weight does matter. So start eating salads a little bit, and maybe you can correct that part of the equation. But weight does matter. So if you got more batteries on one side than you do on the other side, or if it's just not balanced, then obviously it can cause that problem as well. Now here's something you don't want to hear. Over time with hydraulics, especially if there's no reinforcement, the whole frame twists, the car twists, things get uneven. And especially if the hydraulics have been on there for a long time, all that stuff may be bent up. and there may not be a way to 100% correct it. Might be ways that you can shim here or, you know, do there. I've seen people put, you know, 2 donuts on the driver's side, you know, because it wasn't the same size. Just, you know, little simple fixes like that you can do to try and fix the problem. But unfortunately, with hydraulic cars over time, they're just going to bend, and even with a full frame reinforce, you know, it's not as likely to bend, but it still has a possibility of bending depending on how bad you're banging it. So, you know, keep that in mind. This may not be something that you can actually fix if it's an old lowrider. Now, if it's a newer build, let's say you just put the stuff in there and you go to hit the switch and everything like that and it's lifting uneven, don't pay it any attention, because you probably need to bleed the lines, or at least allow enough switch hits to allow all the air to escape and to where all you have is fluid. Otherwise, the air in the lines is going to throw things off. You can always bleed the lines. That's always a good idea, especially with the new system. Or just hit the switch about 100 times and it'll work its way out anyway. Making sure that the car is level goes along with, you know, messing with your alignment as well. So, you know, if the car is lifting uneven and the car is uneven, then it can throw off your alignment. And if the alignment is far enough off, it can throw off, you know, how the car is sitting as well. So, and another thing to point out, if you have hard lines, if the hard lines themselves are longer on one side than they are on the other, or something along those lines, if you've got these exotic ones that run all over the place and those are different lengths than what they are, you know, on both sides, then that can throw it off as well, because it's got more fluid travel. Now, this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Check your tire pressures first. Obviously, if one's got 10 pounds in it and the other one's got 100 pounds in it, it's not going to be level. Another thing, let's say that you've got 2 pumps to the front and they're lifting uneven. If you're running 2 different types of fluid through there, I know that sounds like a silly thing, but if you're running non-detergent on one side and, you know, hydraulic fluid on the other side, those are 2 different fluids. They're 2 different viscosities in there. So, you know, non-detergent, that stuff's a lot thicker when it comes to, you know, cold temperatures. So, which is another factor. Cold temperatures, you know, once the pumps start spinning, they start to heat up a little bit, heating up the fluid a little bit to make it to where it moves a little bit more. But at the same time, that can be an issue as well. I hope you guys found this video enjoyable and informative. I tried to think of every single possibility as why something would lift uneven. At the same time, you know, I can't think of completely everything. So if you're watching this video and you think you might have another idea as to why it would be lifting uneven, post it down in the comments. I'd love to hear some extra, you know, thoughts on why. With that said, please like and subscribe, share the videos so that I can continue to make more informative videos just like this one.